everybody, and welcome to the culmination of our CCS season. It's the finals, and I don't think anyone here is surprised to see the two kingpin teams that are the last two left standing. I'm joined here by Naka. I'm Elsa the Queen, and I'm excited to be here. Thanks for being alongside me.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Honestly, grand finals, both of these teams 3-0'd in the semis, so this could not be more exciting.
Absolutely, and as we already jump into the bands, we see that we've got a couple of teams here who do their homework, as Zig's going to be the first band away from Lost Chapter alongside the Aurelia and the Jinzhou, all picks that have been very, very favored by collective effort throughout these series. Syndra, Misfortune, and Lee Sin being banned away from Lost Chapter, and with Jarvan being the first pick from Lost Chapter, this doesn't surprise me whatsoever. This is a champion that we've seen lots of CCS teams favor. It's a very nice blind pick jungler that gets a lot of early advantages for himself.
Yeah, and it's looking to be answered with the Trundle here. Would be a pretty good pick into the Jarvan if it does end up getting played in the jungle. Of course, we have been seeing it a lot top lane, so honestly, I'm expecting that a little bit more, just off how strong it has been in the top lane. But if it does end up in the jungle, Trundle's a pretty good matchup into it, just because of Trundle's ability to duel with that, with the AD stealing off the queue, right? And I wonder what they're going to pick on the second rotation here. Looks like it is going to be the Ashe. Pretty standard pick as well, honestly. We've been seeing so much Ashe lately across all the leagues, and it's just such a strong AD carry right now, such a safe champion, and really good as a lane bully with certain supports as well.
Yeah, and as this draft starts to shape up, I'm not surprised at all to just kind of see a safe focus from both teams. These are the two teams in the league that we've seen definitely play the most meta, and if you're defining it by what you're also seeing the pros play. And both of these junglers really like things like the Jarvan, the Trundle, the Lee Sin, which was banned away by collective effort. And speaking of the jungle matchup, Gregorio, I regard him to be the best player on Lost Chapter. He's the one who sets the tempo for this team, but I think finally he has maybe met his match in Drip Irrigation for collective effort, who certainly has been, in my eyes, a very strong jungler, obviously assisted by his lanes, but as we see Lost Chapter, their next rotation, they are going to pick up the Ezreal and Rakan, which is kind of an interesting combination. Honestly, not one that I'm always a huge fan of as a 2v2, but what I do like about this combination is that, as we know, Ezreal is a champion that can be left alone in the bot lane for Rakan to be able to roam, and in this roam-heavy support meta, it's nice to be able to unlock that Rakan pick. And just to touch on the Aatrox, which has just been picked up by collective effort as well, me crit you now, he's the top laner for collective effort. A lot of people regard him as maybe one of the weaker members of this team in terms of elo. He is the lowest elo member, but he is an Aatrox one trick in solo queue. So to be able to get that one as on the second rotation, it is pretty big for collective effort, because that's a big piece of the puzzle for this team.
Yeah, I'm honestly kind of concerned that they didn't ban out the Aatrox, giving it over to a player that really only plays that champion for the most part and performs best on that champion for sure, has the most comfort on that champion. Normally, at this level of play, you generally want to ban out those champions just to force them onto something that they're not as comfortable with, because even if it's a more quote-unquote OP pick in the meta, you're generally going to see them perform at a lower level if they're not as comfortable on it. So I generally like to see those banned out, but it is going to come through here, so we're going to see that comfort pick come through for collective effort, and the Thresh is going to be locked in as well to pair with the Ashe here, so they're looking for a very aggressive lane of looking to dominate that bottom side of the map for sure.
Yeah, and I like the Thresh alongside the Ashe. Ashe, an immobile AD carry, definitely is at threat of being caught out, especially when you draft something like Jarvan 4, like Rakan. In particular, against the Jarvan, the Lantern is so useful, getting Ashe out of that Cataclysm when she does not have the flash available. And with Shen being picked up for Lost Chapter, I definitely anticipated a tank in the top lane for Lost Chapter. We see a lot of Mundo from Kevin Chen. We see something like the Shen fits that mold a lot, and Ryze being the last pick for on the blue side makes a lot of sense for me. Shin Yuna, he's a transplant into this mid lane. He came into the league being a support player. They couldn't find any good mid laners for Lost Chapter, so he went into the mid lane and he's fit in there just fine. The Syndra is the other pick that's really big for him, which was banned out. So it's not a surprise at all for me to go to the Rise, for him to go on to the Rise now. But collective effort with this last pick, they're saving it for Philly B, the MVP of the league, and I'm honestly a little bit surprised to see him take this Victor. Certainly Victor is a strong champion. He has that huge wave clear, a lot of AoE damage, but a lot of times we've seen Philly B take some of these picks that are kind of there to dominate the lane phase, and that's not what he's going to be doing against this Rise. So a little bit of a change up there. Interesting to see, but as we already touched on earlier in the draft, both of these teams, I don't think they want to come out with some crazy draft in game one that loses them the game quickly and makes them perhaps feel a little bit demoralized. Instead, they're all coming up with something that's safe, both teams having a lot of scaling, which means that they're always having a nice fallback should they fall behind in the early game.
Yeah, and I was about to bring up, honestly, I'm not surprised at all about this Victor pick. Before we saw the Victor locked in, when we saw the Rise locked in, I was wondering if Collective Effort was going to match the Control Mage in the mid lane, or go with something more roam focused to, or even aggressive in lane, just to try and change up that pace in the mid lane, but they are just going to match it with another control mage. Victor, a very strong mage in the mid lane right now, has a lot of control over the lane, has a lot of control over the chokes in objective team fights. So Collective Effort looking to pretty much match Lost Chapter's team composition for the most part. Both sides pretty standard compositions, very zone focused in terms of how they're going to be playing the team fights in the later stages of the game. So we're going to see that come out towards the later half of the game, but in the earlier half, we're going to see which side decides to actually play more aggressive and look for those early picks to get themselves ahead.
Yeah, and so as I already mentioned as well, Shin Yuna, the mid laner for Lost Chapter, he's new to this role, but you wouldn't know it if you looked at their play throughout the season. Shin Yuna has just been pretty dominant in the mid lane, obviously in large part because of the other strong players that are on Lost Chapter, but if there's going to be a player that can take advantage of their kind of being new to this lane, it's going to be Filiberto. He's the MVP of the league. We saw him on Monday. He picked up the Aurelia, the Akali, and the Corki. Two of those picks were banned out today, and he was just absolutely dominant on all three of those. I know he was on the podcast, which just aired prior to this match, and he was super confident going into the matchup. He said, if I'm playing against someone who's a support main, there is no way that I can lose. He was just feeling good about himself, and that's what you really want to see too from an MVP player going into a grand final. You can't let your nerves get the best of you. You've got to just play your game, know that you're better than your opponent, and carry it through.
Yeah, and with that in mind, we should see Victor pushing in the Rise in the early game here, just because of the obviously the player confidence difference, I'd imagine, as well as just the champion range difference. Rise is a pretty short ranged mage in the mid lane, does have a pretty good wave clear, but if Victor is really good with the spacing, Philly should be able to zone out Shin Yuna in the early game and just force him to play further back, probably push under turret, and that will give Filiberto the priority to move into the side lanes if he wants to go for early roams. So I'm excited to see whether those actually come through as well.
Yeah, and that'll be really huge for Collective Effort, because if there's one thing Lost Chapter is known for, it's their mid-jungle synergy. Shin Yuna and Gregorio constantly working together, constantly roaming around the map. That's actually one of the reasons that I think the Rise works really well for this team, is that global ability to get into those side lanes together. But if you're constantly pushed in on the Rise, as you said, Naka, it becomes difficult for you to move out of your lane and try to make a difference. So the mid lane matchup is really the one that I want to highlight, really want to take a close look at in this game. But as we get into this competitive integrity spectator delay, which team comp do you like overall best?
Honestly, I prefer Collective Effort's team composition quite a bit more. As you said, they have the comfort with the Aatrox in the top lane. They have a very strong dominant mid laner right now. I think Victor is probably one of the best control mages you can have in the mid lane right now. We've been seeing a lot of it being played by these pro players during the EU boot camp. Specifically, Faker and Showmaker have been showing a lot of success on the champion. So is just such a strong pick right now. Especially into the Rise, who again the range difference is going to matter a lot. And then as well with bottom, Ashe and Thresh, very aggressive champions in the bottom lane, very early game focused. So very lane focused rather. So I think that they just have all winning lanes for the most part. They're the only what if was probably top lane. I'm not really sure how Shen matches up into Aatrox, but just based off of the player comfort, I think that collective effort has better, more consistent champions across the board.
Yeah, I agree with most everything that you said, and I think that a lot of the onus to win this game is going to end up going onto that Ezreal, going onto Deprapine. He was voted the all CCS AD carry, so one of the better bottom lane players in this league, but with a lot of weight on your shoulders in the final. Will we see if he's able to pick it up? But we're going to be right back. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, it's going to be game 1 of the grand final of the CCS Lost Chapter Collective Effort. Don't go anywhere. For game 1 of our CCS finals, Collective Effort and Lost Chapter taking each other on. Lost Chapter over on the blue side and Collective Effort is on the red side, and with all 5 members of Collective Effort running towards this bottom side of the map, I wonder if we might have an invade on our hands here in game number 1.
Doesn't look to be the case, unfortunately. I would love to see that early action, but we are going to see a pretty standard 5-point, 4-point for the side of Collective Effort. ECRU now deciding to go down towards the bottom side. Looks like they might have wanted to go for something early, is why Aatrox might have been down there. But now they're just going to move back towards the 5-point there. So both sides playing it pretty safe for game 1 here, just making sure that nothing too crazy happens early. They don't want to feel a little bit too down on themselves before the minions even spawn.
So I wanted to point out that Flan, either way, did not take items so far. He ended up running out of the fountain on Ash without picking anything up. So he does recall. Luckily, either him or his team did notice that one because that would have been obviously a big issue. Not sure if he's going to be able to make it back for the leash, but he should be to lane on time. And just touching on the bot lane a little bit more, Depperpine, he took the cleanse, which I do like this from the Ezreal just because of the strength that not only the Thresh brings with the death sentence, but also the enchanted crystal arrow from the Ashe needs to be accounted for. And yes, Ezreal is a pretty slippery champion, but if Yoma is going to be allowed to roam around the map, it's going to have to be dependent on Depperpine being able to play safe, and the cleanse absolutely allows him to do that. So I like him reading and reacting with his summoner spells here in this game.
Yeah, and honestly, this might be reaching a little bit, but I kind of think Flan could have had some idea of not starting with an item right away. A little bit late on the recall if he wanted to do that, but it does hide the fact that Ash went for the longsword 3-pot start. Obviously, it's becoming pretty standard for AD carries, but you do still sometimes see the Dorn's blade, so might have been a little bit of information being hidden away there, whether intentional or not. So
yeah, no, I think that's a good point, Naka, and I think that the thing about the 3-pot start is if the other AD carry doesn't match that, it's so annoying to not have that sustain, because the AD carry that chooses to go for the longsword can kind of just trade over and over again freely, and that just starts to get really obnoxious if you don't have the pots to be able to match it. Sometimes you can get pushed out of lane really early, so I think that's a good point.
Yeah, we are already seeing Drip Irrigation looking for a possible gank in the mid lane here. As Shin Yuna is hovering that side as well, is going to be spotted by Gregorio going into the river. Gregorio might want to try and go for a bit more, but isn't going to do so. So Gregorio actually is going to get that top scuttle for free.
Yeah, and we'll see if Drip Irrigation is able to make it down onto the bottom side to pick up the other scuttle already so early on in this game. Look at Yoma roaming through the bottom side river. It looks like he's just kind of playing bodyguard onto this scuttle, ensuring that Gregorio is able to pick up the double scuttle priority, which we know is so huge for these junglers. And with Drip Irrigation running over towards this Krug camp, it seems like there might even have been some communication by the bot lane to say, hey, the support is missing. I wouldn't run down into that river because you're probably just going to get gapped with, especially the mid lane being pushed in early from Shin Yuna as well. So Lost Chapter, they play best when they're able to play through their jungler Gregorio, so it doesn't surprise me that they put a lot of effort into making sure that he's able to pick up an early lead on this champion that's already really, really strong early on in the Jarvan. And with Kevin Chen taking a nice trade in the top lane, that's definitely what, Shen wants to be able to stay comfortable in that early lane so that he can get the stand united.
Yeah, and the bottom lane from Lost Shepherd, hold on. Kevin Chen might get a little bit chunked out here. Should be able to live underneath the turret. Does have the flash if he needs it. Gets hit by the W. Is going to get pulled back in. Meat Cretin is going to flash underneath the turret. Should be able to live off the minions there. Yep, is going to do so. But Kevin Chen taking a big chunk of that. And then despite the flash being burned from Meat Cretin that's a lot of pressure that's exerted onto the top side already.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and I actually like how Drip Irrigation stayed a little bit longer to help his top laner make sure that was pushed in. But from Kevin Chen, it takes a lot of discipline, I feel, to not expend your flash in that circumstance, especially once you get hit by that Aatrox W, you're about to get pulled in, but he pops his own W on the Shen. He knows that he'll be able to tank a little bit more damage because he'll be immune to those auto attacks, and that shows me that he really knows his champion. Kevin Chen, again, is another one of the all CCS players, all CCS in the top lane, and we've honestly actually seen in the community quite a bit of criticism about Kevin Chen. People saying he's a top laner, he plays too safe, he's getting gapped by other top laners. But Shin Yuna in trouble.
Flash being forced out of Shin Yuna, going a little bit too aggressive to try and clear the wave. I think Shin Yuna actually expected the possible dive to come through, but Gregorio was here to cover regardless, so I don't think he needed to clear the wave quite so soon. And this is what I'm talking about, right? The range difference between Ryze and Victor. It gives Philly a lot of space here to harass Shin Yuna whenever he tries to go up to farm.
Yeah, and for the first few levels, Rise has a little bit of an advantage just because Victor needs to get a couple of points in that E before he can get the whole wave down and kind of do those things that we expect Victor to do. But as he now has been able to recall for the first time and pick up actually his lost chapter, the namesake of the blue team, he now is going to feel a little bit more comfortable to be able to just easily clear out those waves and start to take the advantage that we anticipated he would. But, going back to what I was saying about Kevin Chen, he's a player that he plays quietly. He doesn't necessarily play to hard win the top lane. I would say it's actually very similar with Shin Yuna in the mid lane. These are players that they play for their team. I know that Filiberto, again, during the podcast, was complaining a little bit that a lot of the mid laners in this league refused to trade with him, and he anticipated that it would be the same with Shin Yuna. And I honestly don't think that Shin Yuna has any reason that he should be trading with Filiberto at any point in this game. He's playing the Rise, which again is such a team-oriented pick, and he's only going to just fight alongside his jungler.
Yeah, we're not seeing any significant leads yet other than the mid lane here, actually. Filiberto already a full wave ahead and should be a little bit more so after catching this next wave here. So, yeah, again, as usual, we're going to see this end up being, as expected, a match between Filiberto in the early game and Gregorio on the other side with the leads that both of them have.
Absolutely, and we see lots of pings going down into the river. It looks like Lost Chapter probably wants to maybe try to start up this dragon if they can. The bot lane has been pushed in by Depperpine pretty well, which gives a little bit of priority, and Yoma, again, roaming out of that bottom lane, just trying to give assistance to his team, but knowing that Drip Irrigation is in the area, they're not going to go ahead and do that for now. But I have been really impressed so far with the macro game from Lost Chapter, the fact that they have caught on to this roaming support meta. They've been able to use the Rakan. That's what it does best. Rakan also probably going to go back into the bot lane pretty soon just to pick up a little bit more XP. And once Yoma hits that level 6 mark on Rakan, that's when the huge ability to engage comes in. We know Rakan is just one of the strongest engaged champions in the game, which is probably the reason that they picked him up. And Depperpine has just been doing an absolutely fantastic job here in this bot lane. 1v2, sitting about 13 CS up from his opponent in Flan. So that's why we do see, I think that's mostly...
Mikryu now ended up burning the World Ender really early in the top lane. Thought that Kevin Chen was going to be a little bit more committed onto that engage. But there's a full wave here. I don't think Kevin Chen would want to fight regardless. So World Ender is going to be burned, and it's going to be a cooldown for quite a while for this Aatrox on the top side.
Yeah, and as we, and as that's going on, objectives being traded by both junglers. Last Chapter going to go ahead and pick up the...
Oh, Kevin Chen wanting to go for more, but again, it's a huge wave. Tanked a bunch of damage off the minions there. And this top lane, it's pretty aggressive in terms of the trades, but no kills actually going down. And as I say that, Cataclysm going to come down onto Dripigation, but the Subjugate's going to keep him alive with the heal. That should be the end of the fight there. The first blood going down on the top side. Kevin Chen really wanted to catch that wave, but was way too low underneath the turret. And that's going to be first blood over to Mikryu now.
And what are you doing if you're Kevin Chen in that circumstance? Yes, there's a huge wave that you want to catch, but the teleport was available for the Shen, so I'm just really confused why he wouldn't have sacrificed a few of those minions just to recall, teleport back into the wave. I mean, even if you lose the entire thing, it's not worth feeding the kill over to the Aatrox and Mikryu now, and, the top laner that we would expect to be the weaker out of these two picks up the early kill, and that advantage on this Aatrox is really critical, because if the Shen is able to accelerate to, one or two items without dying 1v1 to the opposing top laner, he becomes basically impossible to kill in that lane matchup for the rest of the game. So, clutch play by Mikryu now, picking up the 1v1 first blood, and that's not something that I really expected to happen, honestly.
Yeah, and Kevin Chen does pick up the Bramble Vest, so going to be a little bit more safer on the top side, going to be able to reduce a little bit of that healing coming out from the Aatrox early. Gregorio's looking to gank this top side, though, hovering on that Tri-Bush, is starting to walk up now. Doesn't have the Cataclysm, but Mikryu now does get taunted up. There's the World Ender coming out from him, and the Flash to get underneath the turret. Realm Warp coming in with the Flash on the root, though, and there's the Sand United to keep Shin Yuna alive underneath the turret. Gregorio goes deep into that, and Shin Yuna picks up that kill for himself.
And that is the great team coordination that I was talking about with Lost Chapter. We see the way that they're able to tank the turret aggro, with Shin Yuna just feeling confident to dive right under the turret because he knows Kevin Chen has that Stand United available. But now with Drip Irrigation here in the bot lane, I'm curious to see if he's going to want to drop this.
Gregorio gonna go in with an EQ onto Filiberto. Cataclysm's down onto him, but doesn't have any more damage, and the flash is out of the Cataclysm, and the Chaos Storm's gonna finish off Gregorio.
And again, just a little bit of greed from Lost Chapter. Gregorio going in for the 1v1. Yes, it was extremely close, but there's just not really a reason if you're the Jarvan that you have to risk that. He could have just come in to make sure that Filiberto didn't pick up any more turret plates, and that would have been fine, you know, but instead he jumps in, gets greedy, maybe a little bit of nerves coming in with this final, wanting to show that he's the better player out of the 1v2. I know Gregorio and Philly B were the only two players who did get MVP votes in this league, but Filiberto, I mean, there was at least a 1-level gap at that time with the Victor being ahead of the Jarvan, so a little bit of a perplexing, a rare bad decision from Gregorio.
Yeah, and Filiberto just knew that he could stand his ground there. Cataclysm is probably one of the worst ultimates to have against a Victor, where you can just drop the Chaos Storm on you, and you can't really get out of it yourself without dropping a Cataclysm. So, for Victor, right, when Jarvan ults onto him, it's going to be one way or the other every time.
Yeah, and I could just even feel how Gregorio was waiting like 1 second on cue so that he could just, you know, put out the spear there and just try to get the kill, but the cooldown just wasn't there, and he just went down. So again, just a bad decision, and he's probably going to come back to regret that one a lot, because the Victor, you know, even though we talked about how it's a little bit of a safer pick from Filiberto, it's certainly one that scales so reliably. Once he's able to drop the Chaos Storm on the entire team, it starts to get real obnoxious.
Drops down the Chaos Storm onto Shin Yuna. Looks like they wanted to try and go for a bit more there, but they didn't really get an angle to do so. That does force Shin Yuna back. He doesn't have teleport right now, so it's going to be a little bit rough for the foreseeable future in that lane. World Ender coming down on top side. Me Crate You Now gets the first knockup onto Kevin Chen, misses the second. And these World Enders have not really been providing that much value for this Aatrox early.
No, not at all. You know, but not that big of a cooldown considering the fact that it doesn't really help him that much to escape from ganks. I think also he's probably pretty confident that Gregorio is on the bottom side of the map, because we see that the Cloud Dragon is spawning in just a second. But I did want to point out the strong... Oh!
Hook down onto Yama.
But he's all right, but I just wanted to note how much vision has been set down by both of these teams. You can kind of see on the mini-map the amount of vision that's been set down into the river. Some of it has been from collective effort. Some of it's already been spotted out and taken away by Lost Chapter. But they also, the blue team, Lost Chapter, they've also set up so much vision into their own jungle. And both of these teams have, when we've seen them on the stream, we know that they put a huge emphasis on the dragon. And it looks like ultimately, even though the Scuttle did go over on that side to collective effort, Lost Chapter is going to be the first to be down there again. So it will be 2 dragons picked up already, and with an Infernal Rift coming in, you know that both of these teams are going to be hungry for the rest of the dragons. Collective effort is really going to want to grab the next one so that the possibility of the soul is denied, because that's another part of the scaling that's just going to be absolutely critical for both of these teams. Both of them have lots of champions that would hugely benefit from that Infernal Soul.
Oh, that's going to be a 3-second stun there down onto Depper Pine. But no one was there to follow up, so it should be fine. That's going to be Ashe all down for quite a while now. No objectives up right now, so it should be fine, unless either side wants to go for the second Rift Herald here. But I don't think that is going to be the case. And I'm waiting to just see how quickly Filiberto accelerates here on this Victor. It already has a kill, which is even more important for Victor than other champions because of the 25 stacks you get off the passive, right? So this Victor's accelerating extremely quickly and should be able to contest the next dragon as well.
And drip irrigation, we can see how Filiberto having this lead in the mid lane, being able to push up, is benefiting the rest of the map as well, because his jungler able to push off Gregorio from the Scuttle Crab, and with the second Rift Herald being alive here, looks like both teams are looking to maybe get priority over this area. With the Scuttle Crab down, though, it's going to be very tricky for Lost Chapter to come into that river and try to take it down. Both teams kind of just trading a bit of vision. Deproprine going to end up being left down in there in the bot lane, and with the bottom lane from Collective Effort coming up early, they're going to have priority on the Scuttle now. They're going to take that one down.
Yeah, and Deproprine as a response is just going to be looking to get damage onto this bottom outer turret. Meanwhile, the other team's looking to maybe dive Kevin Chen, but Kevin Chen already knows this is coming and is starting his recall early. Is going to be able to get it out. Oh, isn't going to be able to get it out. The pillar stops him, and it looks like they might look to dive top off of this Herald.
Yeah, Realm Warp incoming, though.
You can see the rest of Lost Chapter coming to try and defend, but the turret's going to fall pretty quickly here. Arrow going to come out, stops Shin Yuna in his tracks as soon as he comes in, flashes out, and the Cataclysm onto two members now. Crit me, you crit me now. Sorry, me crit you now. Is very low, is going to be falling as the first casualty of the fight. Filiberto on the backside comes in onto Shin Yuna with the Chaos Storm. Is going to be taken out by Shin Yuna, though. They do trade kills, but Kevin Chen is caught out, and the rest of the team is going to back off. It ends up being a 2-for-2 after all that chaos.
Yeah, overall, a 2-for-2. Tower goes down for Collective Effort, but a tower also going down on the bot side for Deproprine. And you can call it maybe a little bit of a poorer rotation from Lost Chapter because of the fact that their AD carry wasn't there to support them. But you also have to keep in mind that that was a 4v5 team fight, and it still ends up being a 2-for-2, 2 kills going over to both teams. So that shows me that Lost Chapter is still in a really strong position in that fight. Had the Ezreal been there to rain down some of that additional damage, I really think that one could have been turned into the favor of Lost Chapter. But ultimately, being able to pick up that entire turret for the Ezreal is going to be really important, because Ezreal is going to be a huge amount of the damage in the late game for Lost Chapter. Gregorio on the Jarvan will eventually fall off quite a bit with his damage. Obviously, we know Shen doesn't bring very much, and Ryze, while he is a damage threat, his damage is going to become honestly pretty pedestrian in comparison to Filiberto on this Victor. So it's important to funnel the gold down into Deproprine, and they were able to do that. Game still remaining really close here, just a 500 gold lead for Collective Effort.
Oh, Shin Yuna got a good route onto Filiberto. Is going to get stunned by the gravity field, though, and the Chaos Storm is going to push Shin Yuna back. Pretty aggressive trade in the top lane. I feel like Shin Yuna had an angle to maybe get a kill on Filiberto there, but unfortunately could not do so. Is matching pretty well into Filiberto in the mid lane, though. Barely behind in CS, and pretty much same on the scoreboard. Has an extra assist, which pretty much makes up for that missing CS.
Yeah,
but other than that...
Yeah, and I'm impressed. Go ahead.
Yeah, nothing else going to come out of that. And I want to point out about that earlier fight. Ended up being a 2-for-2, and as you mentioned, Ezreal wasn't even there. But on top of that, Ezreal was free farming bottom, got that bottom turret as well off of that. So it's just a lot of gold going back into the hands of Lost Chapter. And with after everything's settled, they're still even in gold pretty much.
Yeah, and with the dragon spawning in just about 5 seconds here, I would anticipate that we're going to see another fight. It's going to be started up right away by Collective Effort, but if we know anything about Gregorio, he'll have something to say about this.
Oh, Gregorio is going to come in, smites way too early, but does have the EQ to get out, so no flash needed. Good attempt to steal, though, but now we see Dragon on the board for Collective Effort, and if they can continue to keep stacking those Infernal Dragon buffs are going to keep adding up pretty quickly here.
Yeah, and that's kind of some of the advantage that that happens when you are taking the first two.
Oh my gosh! Another aggressive trade from these mid laners in the top side, and you can see just how bloodthirsty both of them are. Well, you talked earlier about Filiberto complaining about the league, no one really trading with them in the mid lane, and we're definitely seeing a lot more of that aggression coming out from Shin Yuna now. Doesn't have the Everfrost quite yet, so I don't think he wants to look for another trade until that's up at least. Shinya is at a pretty significant HP deficit, but Gregorio and Yama are here to dive underneath the turret. Quickness comes in onto Filiberto, and that's going to be a kill over to Gregorio. The turret is going to fall before the Ashe ult could hit Gregorio. World Ender coming up from Meet Crit You now, trying to chase down Shin Yuna, does pick up the kill with the W. And now it's a 3 versus 2. Meet Crit You now has a lot of sustain though, as Cider Mill comes in. They're looking to chase even further, and you can see that Gregorio just decided to back out the other way and recall. And Kevin Chen is going to be the sacrificial lamb to keep the rest of the players there alive. Gregorio does get spotted going into the jungle, though, so maybe he'll get caught out here before he can finish his recall. But no, you can see Drip Irrigation walking the wrong way, and that is going to be Gregorio getting out. But that's 2 kills over to the side of Collective Effort.
Yeah, and just another extremely close fight there. I really thought that Lost Chapter was going to take everything there just because they had such a jump. I honestly think that maybe if they had backed off of the turret instead of taking it, I know it was really, really low, but Gregorio staying a little bit longer, and then Me Crit You now just very, very impressive on this Aatrox. It's no surprise that he's a one-trick on this champion because of the fact that he knows his limits. He has so much sustain in this fight. You would have expected that 2v3 the Aatrox, you would have expected him to fall, but instead he continues to stay up. He continues to get that lifesteal and stay alive into the top lane. Ends up being an advantage for Collective Effort with kind of a pretty cheeky escape from Gregorio going back into the jungle after hiding in that top lane area. So again, just really, really close from both teams. It is just a 200, maybe even, it looks like just a 100 gold lead separating both of these squads with the top lane turret going down. And that's really a lot of the difference in the gold right now, or the reason that Lost Chapter is as close as they are, is because there is that difference of the bottom lane turret having fallen for Lost Chapter versus the bottom lane turret still being up on the side of Collective Effort. So we're getting every little bit of what we wanted so far in this game. These are the top 2 teams in the CCS for a reason. They're very dominant. They have good communication. They team fight well, and they're showing us every bit of it.
Oh, Realm War coming in from Shin Yuna with the root as well. Flash taunt onto Filiberto, and he is going to fall. Chaos Storm should not be able to finish off Shin Yuna, and that's going to be Filiberto just getting picked off there, not expecting the Realm Warp to come through.
Yeah, and nice Realm Warp from Shin Yuna, just playing the map with the globals in a way that is very impressive, but again, something that we expect from Lost Chapter to play in this coordinated fashion. And twice in a row, Filiberto a little bit caught out in the top lane. He obviously did get dove under that turret, but granted that the turret was so low, he kind of had to expect that he would be under a little bit of pressure. And then in this bottom lane, he's in such a long lane there, and with the Shen having the taunt, it's really a time where, and the Rise also having the Realm Warp available, you can't be going up that far if you're Filiberto. So maybe getting just a little too invested in this trading with these champions that he's going 1v1 against in the lane. But here we are again. Naka, it's just 30 seconds until the next Infernal Drake spawns, and both teams are hungry to take it down.
Yeah, and you can see Collective Effort already has the first move on it, already in the river, trying to force Lost Chapter out. And they're going to look to try and chase even further before Dragon spawns. World Ender and Enchanted Crystal Arrow going to come out. Unfortunately, it is going to go wide. And with those ultimates down, that's going to give Lost Chapter a little bit of an opportunity to go in here. But the hook is going to land onto Gregorio. Cataclysm's down onto 3 people. But now they're all stuck in the Chaos Storm, as 2 members are already down for Lost Chapter. Kevin Chen looks to be the 3rd, and that's a double kill for Filiberto as the dragon spawns, and they're going to back up towards this and get their 2nd dragon.
And that is just not where you want to fight if you're Collective Effort. You pointed it out in the draft, Naka, but Filiberto on this Victor absolutely thrives in those team fights where you get the enemy team funneled into a small area, and ultimately Gregorio dropping the Cataclysm. I feel that he actually trapped his own team in that area after getting hooked up. So instead of just using his flash to get away from Cider Mill's hook, he's going to get caught. Infernal Drake goes down, and next it's going to be the Baron.
Yeah, and Gregorio just spawned. I don't think he'll actually make it in time to stop this. It's going down pretty fast. They do a lot of damage to this. Oh my god! Drip Irrigation got so low, had to smite early, but luckily for him, no one is here to stop them. But they are going to be caught out as they try to recall here. Remorb comes in. Cider Mill's going to be the first casualty. Flan's falling as well, and Drip Irrigation can barely get out of this. Isn't going to be able to do so. Deprapine on the backside manages to clean them up on the flank. And that's 4 kills over to the side of Lost Chapter. And only 1 Baron left alive on Me Crit You Now.
Yeah, and Lost Chapter, oh, I wish we could have a replay of that team fight, because the way that they play in these team fights is just so much more advanced than a team of the ELO that they are. The way that you could see all 4 of them as a team moving over onto that left far side of the Baron pit, making sure that they're all grouped together, focusing down targets 1v1. I also would just be really curious to hear their comms, because there just must be some very, very clear things coming out. And just like that, yes, they do lose the team fight. The Baron ends up going down, but look at the gold lead, Naka. It is going for Lost Chapter, and you would just not expect that after such a disastrous team fight, honestly, on the bottom side, but arguably even more disastrous as a response.
Yeah, and part of that is that Drip Irrigation actually had a shutdown as well. It was 3-0 before that death came out, so that's a lot of gold swapped back over to the side of Lost Chapter. That's a lot of tempo that's going over to their side now. They are being pushed in with the Baron buff here on Me Crit You Now, so that is going to give a little bit of pressure back to the side of Collective Effort, but there's definitely a lot of tempo swung over to the side of Lost Chapter now, and I'm wondering if they're going to be able to use some of that onto this next dragon coming up in 2 minutes and 40 seconds here.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you know, there is still one, as Kevin Chen just holding down this bottom lane, but there is still one Baron buff available on Me Crit You Now, so if Collective Effort is able to use that well, it still will yield some advantages for this team. It is a little bit of a bummer, because you want to keep generally the Aatrox in a side lane. He doesn't prefer to stay grouped up with the rest of the team using this Baron buff. You'd like him to be able to generate some sort of split pressure, but as it is, he's going to be grouping up with the team instead, and this honestly really inhibits the wave clear from Shin Yuna on the rise, as well as Deprapine with the Ezreal, just because of the reduction in magic damage that these minions do take. So as we see Collective Effort continuing to be grouped up, I think that we're going to see a lot of team fights in the rest of this game, and who team fights is better it will end up separating one of these teams from the other in this extremely, extremely close game number 1.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's fun that Me Crit You Now has been grouping with the team. We have been seeing them engage off of the World Ender pretty frequently in the mid game here, so I think that's their game plan for the most part. They're going to look to try and start fights off of Me Crit You Now with that movement speed and the hard CC coming out from that Aatrox.
Bottom lane turret finally will go down for Lost Chapter. Still a turret lead. 2 turrets up actually for Lost Chapter, which again is going to comprise mostly the entirety of this gold lead. Checking in a little bit on the items, we are seeing 3 items come out from both of the main carries from Lost Chapter, with Shin Yuna picking up the Everfrost, as well as finishing their Seraph's Embrace, and the Zanya's Hourglass, and then the Divine Sunder, the Sorelda's Grudge from Ezreal, and the Muramana also finished off. So especially with those tier items stacked too, that they hit that a few minutes ago, but that was another big break point that Lost Chapter needed to get through to have some of the strength. But 30 seconds on the dragon, and I'm expecting just yet another brawl. And now that both teams have 2 dragons, and the teleport comes in, it means that they both really want to pick it up.
Oh, and Crystal Arrow's going to land onto Gregorio before the dragon even spawns. Cataclysm's going to keep them all in place for now, and Cider Mill's going to be the first casualty of the fight. Me Crit You Now is still pretty healthy and has all the champions he needs to heal off of, is going to pick up 2 kills. Meanwhile, on the backside, Flan's in trouble, though. Deprapine picks up that kill, flashes up to keep himself alive. Gregorio is very healthy if he wants to continue this fight, but immediately is chunked out by Filiberto, and Drip Irrigation is very low, is going to be taken out, and Deprapine, no fear, went back in to finish off the kill onto Filiberto at the end of that. And it's such a scrappy fight. It ends up being a 4-for-4 so far. Deprapine wants to look for more. Does have a lot of range to work with. But Mikritina is so scary on this Aatrox already, and has flash as well if he wants to try and contest. Is going to back off though. So that is going to be dragging over to the side of Lost Chapter, and Soul Point for them as well.
And these fights just continue to be so close. And my MVP of this team fight, it has to be Deprapine. At first, he bides his time in the backline on Ezreal, but then eventually he gets so aggressive, eating over the wall, going for that Q to finish off Filiberto. You know, expending the Zanya's Hourglass to keep himself alive for just a moment longer, but then eventually Deprapine able to snipe him out on the side. And I also want to just point out how long Gregorio was able to survive in that team fight. He dove right in right away using the Cataclysm, and I thought he was a goner. He got pretty low, but his itemization comes in so clutch in this circumstance. The Sterix Gauge ends up popping, which gives him a huge shield, and then Gore Drinker, in my opinion, Naka, the most broken item in the current meta for League, because of the fact that he's able to restore so much of his missing health by hitting the champions using the active for this item. So this game just not disappointing, and now with the Baron having spawned again, that's probably going to be the next objective for both teams. And with 3 dragons for Lost Chapter, that brings them such a big advantage, because as we know, when teams pick up 3 dragons, it means that they're not forced into that bottom lane river to fight over it if they don't want to. Should they get into a circumstance where either they're disadvantaged in vision or you know, they have a member down, they don't have to necessarily fight for that dragon, because it's only the 3rd one for collective effort, whereas collective effort, they are absolutely locked into fighting for that. So just a little bit of a map advantage once that next dragon does spawn, but for now, both teams dancing around the Baron.
Yeah, and you were talking about Gregorio staying alive for so long in that fight. Part of that was that both sides actually, as soon as the fight started, both sides tried to go deep into the backline, trying to take out the carries first. So Gregorio was kind of left alone there to kind of just do whatever he wants as the fight progressed. And with the range differences on specifically just the Ezreal for the most part, no one could really get onto Deprapine to actually finish him off, and Shin Yuna, the other carry, rises a champion that can stand his ground very well. So you just saw, honestly, a lot of champion differences in the opening stage of that fight.
Yeah, and it also just shows how well planned out this draft from Lost Chapter is, with the Jarvan jumping in. It just, with the Cataclysm, just groups several members in for Yoma to be able to go in on the Rakan and use the quickness ultimate in order to charm up multiple members, and then also with the grand entrance, just knocking multiple people up as well. So Shen also to follow it up. But one thing I want to talk about now is that it's going to be up shortly, but there is currently a teleport advantage for Kevin Chen on the Shen. Not only does he actually have the teleport available, but the Stand United as well. Shin Yuna also with his teleport. Oh, and now we are going to see a disconnect from Gregorio, so we're probably going to get into a pause here for a moment, I would imagine. As it looks like it's actually... it looks like the entire spectator is also going to lag, which is something that we are not a stranger to here in the CCS.
Oh, and as we're going to get back into it right now, it looks like collective effort knows Dragon's coming in 2 minutes. They're going to try and force a fight before it even spawns. Gregorio gets hooked right away, but look at the shield coming in from Stand United. It's going to keep him alive for a little bit longer. It's going to fall down to Flan. And look at all the members of collective effort grouped up here, playing together as a team, trying to chase down Kevin Chen now for the 3rd kill. Is going to fall down to Flan for a triple kill, and that should be Baron for the team. You see Shin Yuna pushing on the bottom side, but you can see here that Filiberto is going to recall and match that, so they aren't even going to be able to trade anything off of this.
And Gregorio once again getting picked off to start the team fight. Yes, he does get the Stand United shield as well as the Sterix Gauge shield. It will be popped as Shin Yuna, it does pick up the turret, but won't be able to get anything more. Oh.
Well, Filiberto picking up the kill onto Shin Yuna on the side, as the rest of the team has picked up Baron. Isn't going to recall. They're all going to push up in this top side and get this turret at least. 15 seconds left on Kevin Chen. Gregorio spawning just now, so they should be able to defend the inhibitor turret, but they're going to lose this inner turret here as a result. They're going to keep pushing, actually. Collective effort wants to go for more. They're going to start hitting the inhibitor turret right now. And Filiberto isn't even here. They don't even need the pressure of the Victor to take out that turret. And they're going to keep the inhibitor alive. I really like this. I really like when teams actually leave up these inhibitors. They don't want to funnel the gold and XP into the enemy team quite yet.
Yeah, absolutely. No reason to. They do have the top lane all the way pushed in, and with the dragon just about to spawn in 18 seconds, they need to make sure that they can get their resets out and are able to get over to that dragon pit in time, just because they really don't want the soul for Lost Chapter. Now, Gregorio, he is up. He is in the area, and there is going to be a fight over this.
Oh, teleport coming out already from Filiberto, and Shin Yuna has arrived as well, pushing up the mid lane just to make sure they have priority there. And this is so crucial for either side to get. Definitely more so for collective effort, though. Honestly, if Lost Chapter wants to give this up, they can if they want to try and push out a lane, but they don't really have anything to push, so they definitely want to contest this, being on Soul Point. Yep, the pressure is on collective effort for sure to take this, though, because they need to be the ones to deny the soul. Oh, Enchanted Crystal Arrow is going to land onto Shin Yuna, and he can't stay alive for anything! Double kill already down for Filiberto. Gregorio is going to be the third kill. That's a triple kill already for Filiberto. And a beautiful pillar is going to stop Depripine in his place. Cleanses nothing, and the G is going to come out for naught. That's a quadra kill over to Filiberto. And now for 40 seconds, they can do whatever they want on the map.
Yeah, and that might just be the game, Naga. They're going to go straight into the bot lane where they do have this wave and push in. Not worried about the dragon for now because they're able to at least pick up the inhibitor here. Maybe with the fact that this inner turret was still standing, that might have slowed them down just enough. But they're right now collective effort. They showed that their team comp, it just has a larger amount of damage than Lost Chapter does, especially with Shin Yuna falling so early in the fight. It just means that they can't even have a hope or a prayer to take down all these teams.
Seconds left on two members. Kevin Chen goes in with Taunt and Yauma as well, trying to stall as much as they can, but they can't do it. And that's gonna be game one over to collective effort.
Yeah, then it's going to be a close game, but ultimately a victory for collective effort. Once they're able to take their moment, they snowball the game, they pick up their second Baron, and they don't even need the dragon. They just go for the Nexus. And if that is any representation of what this series is going to be like, wow, we're in for a good one.
This was definitely a hard-fought one from Lost Chapter. We saw both sides not wanting to give a single inch in this game. Neither side really trading anything except for that first Herald Dragon trade, but other than that, they've been both sides contested everything in this game.
Yeah, and just looking at the damage charts, we can see that the Victor was able to pump out by far the most damage in this game. Honestly, that's something that we expected from this pick from the get-go. So, collective effort getting a lot of value off of the last pick. Victor absolutely dominant in these late-game team fights. You know, there was a couple hiccups there in the mid lane where Filiberto did get caught out a couple of times, but it doesn't matter if you show up when all the chips are on the line. Collective effort, taking down game one, and we're going to go to a short break, but don't change that dial because we'll be back in just a couple minutes for game two. Awesome series on our hands, CCS finals. See you in a couple minutes. to game 2 of our grand final for the CCS, with Lost Chapter once again on the blue side, collective effort on the red side. And I'm not exactly sure, I'll have to get confirmation and look into it, but I think that Lost Chapter had side selection in this game, and they do opt to go back to the blue side. And so that's interesting to me. What it's indicative of is that Lost Chapter is a team that plays very well with just getting priority picks. They're not someone who wants to save a counter pick for something like Shin Yuna in the mid lane. They don't really care for saving counter picks either for Kevin Chen into the top lane. So it shows to me that they're probably going to try to get another strong priority pick. And with Jarvan again first picked, I thought Gregorio was really strong on the Jarvan last time. I just want to see a little bit more damage picked up this time by Lost Chapter.
I really like this, actually. I think that the Trundle ban really just indicates that they want to give more priority to Gregorio. He got a lot of priority early, of course, but once Trundle is able to duel the Jarvan, it's a lot harder to play the matchup. So I think taking that out, it's pretty good adaptation here. But other than that, we might see just a run back here from both sides, playing similar compositions, maybe different champions. But I imagine the overall playstyle of both these teams is going to be pretty similar.
Yeah, and Sejuani locked in for collective effort. Certainly a champion that we've seen have a lot of prevalence in past metas. Something that it's not out of this world to see it being taken now, but certainly not one of the very strongest jungle picks. And what it signals to me is with Lee Sin being left open by collective effort, or even kind of trying to bait that one from Lost Chapter, because that is one of the signature champions for Gregorio, but instead they stick to the Jarvan 4, and that makes sense to me because there's no way that Drip Irrigation doesn't play Jarvan. So forcing him onto something else like this Sejuani, again, just to speak to more of what you said, Naka, it gives that early priority to Lost Chapter and to Gregorio. But with Ashe and Braum being locked in as the bot lane, this is an extremely strong bot lane from Lost Chapter. I think it gives them a lot of more 2v2 dominance than what they had in the last game. And Echo has been locked in for Filiberto. It was banned all throughout the series that we saw on Monday. It banned away from Filiberto. It was banned last game by Lost Chapter, and Echo is his #1 played champion. Last game we thought maybe the Victor didn't give him as much agency as we would have liked. He's gonna have it with this Echo pick.
Yeah, and collective effort deciding to drop the Ashe pick on second on R2 here, going for the Sejuani instead, and giving themselves the comfort picks in both top and mid this time around before the second ban phase could come through to target them out. So I like the adaptation from them here as well. It shows a lot of confidence after that Game 1 win.
Yeah, and looking to the bans, the round 2 bans here, Twisted Fate, Rise, both being banned out alongside the Syndra. They're really just trying to limit the champion pool from Shin Yuna. He's been a little bit untested with this, to be honest, throughout our CCS split. He's played a lot of Syndra and a lot of Rise, definitely by far his 2 most played champions. The TF, I actually happen to know because on an analyst desk earlier when we had Shin Yuna on, he talked about how he didn't really feel very highly of the TF. It's a champion that it seems like it would fit his wheelhouse with the global and with the CC that it brings, but not something he necessarily likes to play. Mordekaiser locked in, just another really safe pick for the top lane. And now with the Graves locked in last, this is something that I've seen a lot of in solo queue. Naka, you talked about those kind of boot camp streams where you've seen a lot of the pros. Graves in the mid lane, that's absolutely where I'm thinking that this pick is going to go, and I'm really excited to see it because it's not something that I'm very familiar with.
Yeah, I'm really happy to see this. Graves is such a dominant champion when he's in lane, especially into champions like Echo who can't really duel him that well. Even if Echo gets onto him, Graves can kind of just stand his ground, dish out his damage there. And of course, Graves thrives in the close range, close quarter combat skirmishes, right? So we're definitely gonna see that here, and Graves should be able to push out the mid lane for the most part. Being able to get that lane priority. So Echo is really gonna have a tough time trying to get out of laning phase against this Graves for sure.
Yeah, and I like the way that Collective Effort has picked up a couple of really supportive champions to go alongside the 3 other very aggressive picks that they took. Aphelios for Flan in the bot lane. I like how they're showing that the bot lane are from Collective Effort, that we've got this meme going around in the chat of Flan. Maybe he can only play Ziggs. He played Ashe in this last game. So what? Kind of some of these champions that are easier to play just because they're centered around very specific roles. But if you want to test the ability of an AD carry, putting them on something like an Aphelios absolutely does that, but having the Lulu from Cidermill in his back pocket, having the wild growth to be able to pop him up and keep him safe is going to be really important as we get into the later game team fights, especially. But the wild growth also, I think it synergizes really well with something like the Echo, that just dive into the backline. If you're able to get the wild growth onto him, it can pop up a lot of the team members and just kind of create some kind of a wombo combo type situation. So as pedestrian as the drafts in game 1 were, I feel like it's kind of the same, but in the opposite direction here for game 2. The Graves being picked up, the Aphelios and Lulu, and then even the Echo, but the most important for me, we already highlighted the mid lane matchup last game, and it really didn't disappoint, as you pointed out, Naka. So well, Shin Yuna was not afraid to trade with Filiberto all throughout the game. And if you like seeing 1v1 mid laner fights, Echo and Graves, that's going to be on a whole nother level from Rise and Victor.
Yeah, honestly, if Shin Yuna plays this as aggressive as I hope he will, I don't think Filiberto will actually be able to play the lane. Just constantly being shoved in by the butt shots coming up from Graves should make it pretty hard for Echo to even look to trade him if he's always constantly being shoved underneath the turret. Graves did get a mana nerf to his Q. 20 mana up is pretty significant, but honestly in lane it's not really going to matter too much. It's going to make him maybe lose 1, maybe 2 Qs at most in lane before he needs to recall. But other than that, I don't really see it affecting how the lane's going to go that much. So we'll see if Lost Chapter can do anything with that priority in the mid lane, or we'll see if Collective Effort can do anything to stop that from happening. Maybe Filiberto has a way of playing the lane that I'm not really sure of against the Graves, but if he can find an angle to relieve some of that pressure, it'll be really good for Collective Effort.
Yeah, and if there's anyone in this league that would know how to win this lane, it's going to be Filiberto. He has by far the most solo queue games on his account on this Echo Champion. He was on the podcast for people who listened just before this, talking about how Echo is his absolute favorite champion. He loves to pilot this pick, and a lot of it is, I'm sure, because of the assassination potential, because of the agency he has to be able to play in these side lanes, as I anticipate that he will do. Both of these mid laners really do play very well alongside their teams, so I do think that both of them will probably pick up the teleports again, but that won't inhibit them from playing aggressive in the mid lane. And so once again, it's going to be about Drip Irrigation and Gregorio coming into the mid and also fighting over these scuttle crabs with their mid laners. We saw a lot of 2v2 into the mid lane, and I expect to see that again. But going down into the, or going rather up into the top lane, I like that Kevin Chen was given a little bit more ability to fight and stand up for himself in the lane this time against the Aatrox. I don't think there was necessarily anything wrong with the Shen. Kevin Chen, he did kind of honestly feed that first blood over to me crit you now, which was not something that he needed to do, but now that he has the Mordekaiser with that Death Realm, able to take one member out of the fight and able to win those 1v1s, I think it'll give us the ability to see the all CCS player that he is in this 1v1 matchup.
Yeah, and honestly, yet again, I'm really liking Collective Effort's composition. We're seeing pretty similar standard playstyles from both sides again this time, except in the mid lane. It really indicates that both sides are looking to skirmish a lot more early, looking to get those early leads and push themselves into the mid game to play for those objectives. And Collective Effort in particular, we talked about last game with the Aatrox having so much sustain, just going into the entire enemy team and staying alive, and that survivability is pretty much tripled up here with the Echo, with the Lulu as well. So it's going to be a very tough time for Lost Chapter to manage to pick anyone off.
And just before we go into this spectator delay, I want to talk a little bit about the scaling from both teams. Certainly there are scaling effort elements from both Lost Chapter and Collective Effort, but with the Aphelios and the Lulu being these bottom lane lock-ins, I really think that there's a bit of more of a scaling advantage towards Collective Effort in this game in comparison to the last one, where I felt like it was fairly even. Certainly the Victor did end up outscaling pretty hard in the end in the hands of Filiberto, but if you are Collective Effort and you do fall behind a little bit, you are able to just fall back to, hey, we can continue farming up with this Aphelios, make sure he gets to that 3 or 4 item mark, and then that's the point at which Flan, who did play really well in game 1, should be able to take over. The Sejuani is going to get tankier and tankier, and unlike the Jarvan, who falls off a little bit in his damage, you never really expect Sejuani to do damage, right? She's there to throw out her ultimate and catch members out, so I would look for Lost Chapter have a little bit more pressure on them to get something going in the early game. But until then, we are going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to be back in just a minute. Game 2 of Collective Effort versus Lost Chapter. Game 1 was a banger. We're hoping we're going to get the same from Game 2, and I'm sure we will, so stay tuned.